Hey everyone, Whiskey here. Welcome back to Harp and Guitar, People in Music. Thanks for coming by for a visit today. My friend Monk Music posed a very interesting question. Excellent question, Monk, and definitely going to dive into that. He posted a question in video form regarding the shuffle beat or the shuffle rhythm in blues music. It's a very popular form of percussive beat that you find in all sorts of blues, whether it's the sort of the slow drag Delta blues, or sort of the more acoustic versions of the blues that cropped up in Georgia, Alabama, and in the Florida Panhandle through the very, very early 1900s. And Monk's question is a very poignant question about, where did this shuffle beat come from, and why is it so popular amongst all sort of different subgenres of the blues. So, in order to explore this topic of, where the shuffle beat or the shuffle rhythm came from, first it's important to understand the context in which this specific type of rhythm was first born or developed. Obviously, it comes from the American South during the time of slavery and shortly after the emancipation. And this specific or this particular type of rhythm or beat, the shuffle, is born out of the Mississippi Delta. And very, very early on, in the early 1900s, many African American slaves and even some freemen were brought to work in the Mississippi Delta to clear a lot of the land from the forested areas and drain a lot of the swamps that were in that area, so that they could cultivate the land and develop it and use it for growing cotton and string peas and tobacco. And around the same time, there was a lot of restrictions put on the African American men during this time. They were restricted in their, not only their freedom of movement and the things that they could say, but also restricted in a lot of their cultural observances, such as music, for example. I think we're all pretty aware of the fact that drums and percussions play a large role in African music. And obviously, African music is one of the largest influences on early American blues. When some of these early slaves were brought to the United States, they were prohibited from playing drums. The idea being that the wealthy landowners in that area at that time were a little ignorant to the fact that they sort of believed that these African American slaves could communicate with one another by playing different rhythms and beats on their drums, and communicate over vast distances with these drum beats as a form of hidden language. And the wealthy landowners were afraid that if they practiced this sort of technique, that they could get the word out to start a revolt or an uprising. So they banned percussive instruments like drums. But the resourceful men of those early times that they were decided that what they would do was play other instruments in a percussive style. So they started playing more traditional instruments. They started sort of getting away from their homemade African-inspired instruments, string instruments or wind instruments, and adopted the more common instruments that were found in the areas that they lived in the South at that time. The two big ones, of course, being the piano and the guitar. And that's why in the early days of the blues. Excuse me. That's why in the early days of the blues, we see and hear a lot of evidence in this sort of percussive style that they would play. They adapted the percussive way of playing from drums and transferred that over to piano and guitar. So that's why the Mississippi Delta blues is well known as being a very hard driving and very percussive type of blues music. Because they were forbidden to play the drums, they would have to carry the beat or pick up the beat with other instruments. And this sort of eventually became known as the shuffle. The term the shuffle itself actually comes from a type of dance which was also known as the slow drag. And it was literally people dancing to this percussive style of music, and they would shuffle their feet along the wooden floorboards in their homes or in a juke joint where this music would be played, and they would accompany or actually even help to provide this beat by stomping their feet and shuffling their feet in certain manners the way they danced. And this helped to, again, provide the percussion portion or the rhythm portion of the music and help to propel that sort of driving sensation or that driving force behind the early Delta blues. Now eventually, of course, once the ridiculousness of these laws forbidding drums being played were lifted, of course then we start to see a lot of fantastic drummers come onto the scene and adopt this shuffle beat or this percussive way of playing the shuffle back into what was originally the original instrument was intended to be, which were the drums. And there's many examples of fantastic shuffle percussionists and drummers. Probably the most widely accepted as being the best is a man by the name of Sam Lay. And Sam Lay is widely regarded as being the sort of the shuffle king on the drums. And he's played for many successful blues bands over the years. The Chicago Blues Band, the Chicago Blues All-Stars. He played with Paul Butterfield, and he had his own band, the Sam Lay Blues Band, and many others. He's played with Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and he's played with some lesser-known fellows like Robert Nighthawk. The list goes on and on. So yes, hopefully that answers your question there, Monk, and hopefully that provides a little bit of insight into where this shuffle beat or this shuffle rhythm comes from. Again, just as a recap, the African Americans at that time in the early 1900s in the southern United States were forbidden from playing percussive instruments like the drums. So they had to adapt this percussive style with other instruments to help drive that beat. And so they started playing their guitars and pianos very percussively to really drive it. And then the people that would be enjoying and participating in the music, dancing to the music, and celebrating their revelry, they would help to carry the beat as well with the way that they danced by shuffling and stomping their feet. So that's the origin of not only the shuffle rhythm, but how it got its name as well. So yes, hopefully that answers your questions, and I hope that you found this educational and interesting and informative. So once again, I want to thank all of you fellas, and thanks again to Monk for posing a very interesting question. Right, okay, I think that's going to do it for today, so thanks again fellas for swinging by and paying us a visit. Talk to you again real soon. Thank you.